guys, quick top tip for you when you're dealing with paint that's been softened up by paint stripper, as we are with these legs here on the old Boxford lathe. Using a scraper of any sort, this is a Stanley scraper, it just fits normal Stanley blades, quite an old one. I use this for head gaskets and so on, that kind of thing. Once it's been softened up, it comes off ever so easily with a scraper. Gives you a nice fresh surface there. Might need another coat on that, might be able to bring it off just with a Scotch Brite pad or whatever, but we can get some very good results without actually scratching the surface. So this is approaching done. I'm just going to give it another quick coat and then polish that back down. So we've got the paint off, got the primer off. Turns out there was actually quite a bit of filler in there as well, so I'm going to use some isopon basically just to flatten this out, sand it back flat, give it a lovely finish ready for the for the primer and then the top coat. Mystery solved on what it's made of. I believe the feet are actually made, believe it or not, of cast aluminium. They're very light, but scratches extremely easy, definitely not magnetic, whereas the base is steel or cast iron, probably cast iron in fact, all day long. So the feet we don't need to worry about. Again, quite a lot of striations from the original manufacturing process. Some of the original primer still in those. I'm just going to leave that in there. Give it a nice new coat of rust inhibiting primer, although of course it won't rust, and then the top coat. This is the piece I'm more worried about though. So this has now been stripped back. There was already some rust on the top, and you can see where the central block with the sliders on has sat all these years, because from here to here there is a continuous patch. You can actually see the dividing line there where it goes from clear metal that was underneath the pulley unit onto the rusty section here. So smoothish down here, again smooth on the tail where the tailstock block was, but from here to here surface rust. I'm going to treat that using Hammerite rust remover in the first instance, and we're going to see if we can get away with that. If we need something a bit more aggressive, then I'm going to use Harpic 10X, which is a stronger acid. So I know this is steel now, possibly identified that with a magnet, so I'm going to use a brass brush to just stir the surface up a little bit, and I'm going to use some of the Hammerite rust remover gel. Now this is quite gentle stuff, so I'll just slap this on and let it work its magic. As I say, the bits where it's particularly rusty, I'm just going to shake up the surface a bit with this as it's going on. The rest of it I'm going to give it a coating anyway, just with a normal paintbrush, but the little brass brush here, as you can see, just to stir up the surface rust. and help it on its merry way. Now with this particular bench top, it doesn't matter about getting this stuff all over it. It's covered in mill scale anyway, nice and shiny but covered in mill scale, so I'll just clean that down afterwards. And of course this won't have any impact on the brass label at the front. Don't want to take that off because it's riveted on anyway. All I need to do here is just give it a good splat, get rid of the surface rust, and then immediately give it a good basting with some rust inhibiting oil until such time as I've got all of the surface prep done, and that's filling and fairing, and I can get the anti-rust primer onto it. And that's this stuff. So grey primer, grey top coat, and in the meantime we'll just get this slider nice so that all it takes is a thin layer of grease or oil on the top of that to get it moving nicely. Now to be fair, you don't need to move the actual locking unit that holds the slides a great deal, but it would be nice to be able to do so without having to wrestle with it. So yeah, as part of the restoration, we'll get rid of all unwelcome additions, meaning the rust, and prep it for a nice tidy top coat. Now as I was stripping the paint off there, as I took the very top layer off, it's become increasingly apparent that the top layer was just dirty, and that industrial grey that I mentioned the other day, this one here, is actually a pretty perfect match for the original factory colour, so we should be using that industrial grey enamel paint. So I'll just get on with this. No point keeping you watching this. I'll do all this off camera, but all I'm doing here is basting this in rust remover gel. Don't need to do the base bits because they are a non-rusty material, which is nice, saves a job. If I'm honest, a little bit surprised by that, because everything was feeling so heavy due to the weight of this base piece. I had been working on the assumption that they were probably themselves the same material that the main unit was cast from, but not the case. There you go. So we'll get this basted, leave it for a bit, a couple of hours, come back, agitate it every once in a while, and then we can start to think about polishing the sliders on the top up, get that back into tip-top condition, and talk next steps with the refinishing. All of this, by the way, amounts to basic bodywork. You'd do the same with a rusty panel on a car. Okay, cool, so I'm just going to get on with this here. I'll speed this bit up just so you don't have to sit there and watch it, but all I'm doing is giving it a little brush with a softer material than the item that's being brushed, so it can't damage it. All it's going to do is damage the loose or rough stuff on the surface. This is coming along beautifully. So this bit here, completely free of rust now. This bit here, the surface layer of rust is pretty much gone. The really rough stuff that was on here has all been kind of burned away. It's not left a particularly pitted surface. I will need to rub this with a Scotch-Brite pad probably. I'm just going to stick with the brass bristle brush for now. Please pardon the alliteration. And we'll just give this another blast. And I think in an hour or two, once this has done its stuff, we will be very close to being in a position to just wipe this down with a rag. I'll just preempt that here now. That's looking lovely. So just this bit here is still a little bit pitted, so I'll keep going with that with some fresh gel. This section here as well. And once all of this surface corrosion is gone. Just get a little bit more on the sides. I'm going to hit this with some penetrating oil and or rust inhibiting oil. I've got a number of choices for that. Just go with the penetrating oil to hold it for now, and then when I need to clean a surface off to be processed with either filler or primer and all that good stuff, I'll just clean it down with brake cleaner. It's this being steel, you can be pretty heavy-handed with it as long as you don't score any of these surfaces, and that's why I'm using the brass bristle brush rather than a steel bristle brush, which might scratch it. And I should add, by the way, this is actual solid brass bristles as opposed to steel bristles coated in brass, and you do see those sometimes, but this is a decent one. So I can be absolutely confident that this isn't damaging the rails here. What it is doing is making a real nice job of cleaning them up. So, not an awful lot more required to get that back to where it needs to be, which is really pleasing. Of course, when this is all derusted, I'm going to need to mask these bits off when I prime the rest of it. But for now, I'll just get rid of the rust and then hit it with something that will stop a fresh layer for me. This doesn't need an awful lot more attention, so at this point I'm going to call that for now, just so that you can see what effect this hammerite rust removing gel has had. I'll just bring you in a little bit closer. There you go guys, bit of elbow grease, all the rust's gone, polished right the way back, all the primer off. Now the surface has got a bit of a weird texture going on, a little bit like it's been beaten. I suspect it's rather more just where the sand and so on from the casting process has been ground off. A little bit like a kind of a large scale hammerite finish. What I'm going to do, I think, is put a bit of body filler on there, a bit of isopon, flatten it out, and then prime that. Yeah, really pleased with how that's turned out. Nice and clean. I've given it a protective coating of oil just to stop it surface rusting, flash rusting whilst I'm getting it ready for paint. But yeah, very, very happy with that. Just a lot of elbow grease involved. Next step, filler, primer and paint.